Good morning and welcome to this February 16th call meeting of the Vestavia Board of Education. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda, which is displayed on the screen. Do I hear a motion to approve? And second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next order of business is to approve the minutes of the January 31st meeting that have been distributed. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
And second? Second. Is there any discussion or corrections to the minutes? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll now turn the meeting over to Dr. Mason for consent items.
All of the consent items today are out-of-state or overnight field trips. I recommend approval of those.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve out-of-state and overnight trips as submitted. Do I hear a motion to approve? So moved. And second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we now have two employment contracts to consider this morning. So I'll ask Mr. Boone to give us an overview of the contract with Dr. Freeman first.
Good morning, everyone. At our January 31 meeting, we did two things. First, we selected Dr. Michael Todd Freeman as the next superintendent, and secondly, you appointed a negotiating team consisting of Nancy Corona, Jerry Dent, and myself to negotiate an employment contract. There is an organization called CLASS. CLASS is an acronym for Council for Leaders in Alabama Schools. And a lot of the superintendents across the state belong to CLASS. And one of the advantages of belonging to CLASS is that if a superintendent's going to negotiate an employment contract with a board, CLASS, at no cost to the superintendent, will furnish an attorney to help negotiate that contract. Shortly after our January 31 meeting, Mark Boardman, who has handled several cases for us, called me and said, I represent CLASS, and CLASS wants me to help Todd Freeman negotiate the contract. And he went on to say that since I've represented the board at Vestavia, is it okay for me to do this? And as far as I'm concerned, we couldn't find a better person to deal with than Mark Boardman. So with Nancy and Jerry's consent, we proceeded to negotiate the contract. And as we remember, Dr. Phillips resigned effective September 1 of 17. And the statute gives us 180 days to fill the vacancy. What does filling the vacancy mean? Does it mean sign a contract, or does it mean the man sits in the chair? Our deadline was the end of February. And so our negotiating team set out with a goal to start the contract as of March 1 of 2018. And I want to say at the top that the negotiations were successful. Our negotiating team reached a consensus that we're willing to recommend the document that's in front of you. And Mark Boardman did the same for Dr. Freeman. But I do want to emphasize, under no circumstances does a negotiating team have the authority to bind this board to anything. And we didn't. We just had a meeting of the minds of what we were going to recommend to you. So, Dr. Freeman, as we found out, cannot start work until March 12 because of some contractual obligation he has with the Sylacauga Board. And March 12 is past the deadline. So our negotiating team was successful in doing two things. We requested our hero, Dr. Mason, to stay an additional 12 days, and we contacted Dr. Richardson, who's the state superintendent, and requested permission to extend beyond the deadline, and I want to read his email. This is in response to our request. This is to approve your request for an extension of time for your newly selected superintendent to assume office. I believe that the Vestavia board has made an excellent decision. So, at any rate, we have permission to extend beyond the deadline, and at this time, I want to just highlight what the document says, and at the end, I'll be glad to answer anybody's questions. The document consists of 19 sections. The first one says we hire him and he agrees to work for us as superintendent. The term is 3 years, 3 months, and 20 days, beginning March 12 of 18 and ending June 30 of 2021. You probably asked me, what's so magic about June 30? June 30 is the end of the school year, according to Alabama law. The school year actually begins July 1 and ends the following June 30. So every contract that I'll ever draw for you will end on June 30, because that reduces the chance of legal entanglements of how many years is this contract. The salary is $190,000 annually. It will be adjusted upwards automatically if the legislature or this board gives a raise. The contract provides for an allowance for an automobile of $1,000 per month. The superintendent pays all of the expenses for operating it. If the superintendent goes out of the district, he can fill out a little voucher form for IRS and get 53 cents a mile if he's out of the district in the automobile. The board, in accordance with board policy, will reimburse the superintendent for business expenses, travel expenses, and dues to join professional organizations. The superintendent will get vacation at the rate of 1 day per month, just like all employees. The fringe benefits include a major medical hospital family medical plan that includes vision and dental. The retirement contribution will be made by the employee, him, and the employer, us, just in accordance with the state statute, in the amounts according to the formula based on what he makes. The board will pay for a life insurance policy in the face amount of $100,000. He gets to choose the beneficiary. He gets personal leave of 5 days like all other employees. And if there are any benefits that I've left out, he gets those too, provided everybody else gets them. His duties are to be the CEO and secretary of this board, to follow state and federal law, to follow the duties outlined in our policy manual, and anything else delegated to him by this board. This is a full-time job. It's not an 8 to 5, 5-day-a-week job, as we all know. This contract provides flexibility for Dr. Freeman to zip down to Sylacauga if he's got a button to tie down on a business matter with his former board. Even though it's full-time, we have agreed that he can lecture if somebody invites him to speak. He can write a book if he wants to, but he will be a full-time employee of this board. He will run the administrative office, but the hiring, termination, and discipline will be under Alabama law. he recommends you approve. We will evaluate the superintendent annually on or before June 30 of every year, beginning 2019. We didn't do it in 2018 because it's such a short period of time. The contract, you don't go into a deal thinking you're going to fire somebody, but all contracts have that the employer can discharge the employee for good and just cause. We define that as incompetency, immorality, misconduct in office, willful neglect of duty, or when the board determines that it's in the best interest to do so. If we terminate an employee, it's without any further financial obligation. He gets sick leave like all the other employees, which I think is 1 day a month. He will be required within 30 days before the end of each year to file an annual report, state of the board, like we've always done. Moving expenses, we recommend a $10,000, up to $10,000 paid directly to a moving company, provided the moving company is in Vestavia Hills. I didn't know we had any moving companies in Vestavia, but we have two. And the last one is that we will pay up to $14,000 for relocation expenses. Dr. Freeman's going to be traveling 280 pretty regularly until he can decide to buy a house and all. We have capped that at up to $14,000, and he has to, just like all other employees, submit a receipt and get reimbursed. I'm proud to tell you that Dr. Freeman has signed the contract. So if we're like Monty Hall, we can make a deal this morning. The letter from Mark Boardman says Dr. Freeman has signed the contract, but it's contingent upon approval of this board signing the contract, because he has not actually resigned from Sylacauga. Won't do so unless he knows he's coming here. So with that, I'll be glad to try to answer anybody's questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boone. Can we get a motion on the floor to have discussion? Do I have a motion to approve the superintendent employment contract? One second. All right, let's have discussion. Got questions or comments for Mr. Boone? One thing, I'm not sure if you mentioned this or not, I don't think I heard it, but we did decide to defer his first annual evaluation until 2019.
I did, I said it.
All right, good. That's a change for that.
I was looking at Steve when I said it. And as your lawyer, from a legal standpoint, I recommend the document to you.
All right, any other comments? We ready to vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, Mr. Boone, if you wouldn't mind going back to public reports, please.
This one's going to be real short.
Yes, we'll talk about our revised interim superintendent.
In order to further help us, this board, Charles has agreed to stay for an additional 12 days. I have prepared a short amendment that says two things. He will work from February 28th through March 11th, and we will pay him $1,000 because the state of Alabama has increased the amount from $30,000 to $31,000 as the maximum amount that a retiree can make from working for another state agency. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boone. Do I hear a motion to approve this revised interim superintendent employment contract?
So moved.
And second? Any discussion? I would just like to thank Dr. Mason for agreeing to it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Personnel?
Yes, I have several personnel actions that the board has in your information that I recommend approval for.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve personnel actions as submitted. Do I hear a motion to approve? And second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Update for us, Dr. Mason.
I wasn't there.
Okay, our last order of business then will be to invite public comment. We ask that you please limit your comments to agenda items, that you come to the podium and give your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes if possible. Do we have any? All right, stand adjourned.